In this lesson, we'll learn how to model a tapered spiral stair, and we'll also create a timber facade lattice around the central tower that we have in the middle of our building. First of all, I'm just going to hide some of the layers that I'm not going to be working on. So for example, the facade, space frame, expo pods, as well as the site context, we don't necessarily need all of those. We're going to be working on the column layer, so let's just activate that as our current layer, and let's now move towards the central tower that we're going to be working on. So this line here indicates where our entrance is going to be, so we want to think of that as well, so that we create an opening within this tower, and then we want to create a lift core as well as a spiral stair that moves us up throughout this building. So in the top view, you can look at the central point where this tower is, where the spiral stair is going to be located, and we can now go down to the stairs within our main simple primitive. So you go across to where your geometry tab is, then go down to stairs and then choose spiral stair. Now all of these figures are going to be done after once we've created the base object. So let's just drag out from the center, and we can now go and click again just to specify the height, and we can now go and manually input all of the figures so that they are correct. First of all, the overall height is the one that I would get done first, so just increase that or type it in if you know the exact height. It's going to be about 20 meters in our case. I'm going to pin that down because that height is not going to change. Next, I'm going to adjust the riser height to be 0.175. So that is a standard stair. And next, I'm going to look at the radius of the stair itself so that the outside of the stair is just slightly inside my tapered tower. Next thing, you can also have a look at the thickness of the tread itself, so you could go down to where that thickness value is. So let's just scroll down here. The step thickness is 0.08 at the moment, and that pretty much seems fine for a decent structural stair. So I'm not going to worry about the structure of it or any railings at this point. We are still working at a conceptual level. So the main thing is to create our elements so that we understand in our minds what is going to be going in there. So the next thing I'd like to do is to create a taper so that the spiral stair doesn't actually go outside of the tower towards the top. So to do that, let's just copy and paste the same taper modifier that we used for that tower. So once it's pasted in, you can see that the top of that stair is actually tapering in, and it's going to have this spiral look in the top view. The next thing I'd like to move on to straight away is the structure for this central tower. So what I'd like to have done here is a set of vertical timber fins that are going to be running all the way from top to bottom, and they're going to be indicative of this tree element without being too literal, but timber would be quite a nice material to use for that element. So to do that, what we're going to do is first of all start by making a copy, so Control V, of this object, which is our source object. I'm going to isolate that copy out, and I'm just going to go down to the main circle level of that modifier stack, and I'm going to increase these steps to about a figure of 20. You can go and manually measure what the spacing is going to be. So at the moment we have 38 centimeters of spacing, so that's about 12 inches between them at the bottom, and at the top it's going to be slightly narrower. It's going to be about 24 centimeters. So now I can go and extract those vertical edges out of that, and I can just select on all of those with the edge selection, and I can now go down in the list and I can choose Create Shape using the linear option for the shape type. So that editable spline that is extracted out of it now, if you can have a look, it's a separate object. Now we can go and create a sweep onto that object and just have a very simple square bar, and we can choose the central alignment point so that it basically doesn't deform where they are placed. Often when we choose alignment points that are outside of the center, you'll see that certain edges of the spline are actually reversed because of the way that the geometry was made, so that they won't be perfectly spaced out correctly once we have an off-center alignment. So I just like to have that in the center, and you'll generally get the right result. Next, what you can do is you can start changing some of the parameters within the length and the width. So let's go and increase the width to 0.05 and then the length is going to be 0.12. So we just want to create a slightly wider or narrower but deeper fin as we go up. We can even increase that to about 0.8 or even 0.2 if we feel that that is not going to completely block out the light. Next, we can use that same source object that we were working with before, and we can now go and cut more edges into it. So what I would like to do now, the other thing you can do as well is if you don't want to have the hassle of looking at two objects, you can just create an instance on the side, and then anything you create to the instance is automatically going to be created here. So that's also another little nice tip to simplify what you're looking at. So I'm going to right click here and basically add a few more edges into it. So adding a few segments by right clicking and connecting those edges. So I'm going to have, let's say, 5 series of rings going down this tapered column, and I'm going to do the same thing where I create the shape out of those selected edges. So again, you can choose either smooth or linear. I generally like to choose linear because it will result in a lower poly form, and it's going to give me a much simpler result to work with. So now that you have that shape here, you want to basically create the same thing on the left side. So let's just go and extract that out. So I'm going to do the same thing here because at the moment they have been extracted on the right hand side only. So create shape, and there you go. So this I can go and delete. I don't need these rings because I've got them on the left. And this source object, in other words, the editable poly, I can go and now hide by adding it to the source object layer. So these rings can now be swept as well. So we can create a new sweep modifier onto that, and we can create something that looks a little bit more realistic in this case, perhaps a channel. And let's go and just make it slightly thicker. We can reduce the radius to 0, and let's just also make these sizes a little bit bigger. Let's go and invert this to the other side. So we can just mirror that across, and we can also move it along the x-axis locally. And let's just move it inwards so that it is sitting on the inside of these vertical fins. So right now we have quite a logical structure. We have a steel frame, we have vertical fins. You can even create another one at the bottom if you like. And at the moment, the only thing that we need to do before finishing the lesson is just to cut out. I'm also going to hide this object. We just need to cut out an entrance so that we can basically climb into this tower and move upwards. So to do that, you can either edit the spline by just refining your form. So you can right click and refine and basically add a few vertex points onto the editable spline that you have in front of you. What you can do as well is you can go and add another editable poly on top of your sweep, and you can go in here, select all of your vertical edges, right click, connect them once, and then selecting your vertices that you have created here in the middle, you can include the constraint to be on the edge, and you can basically slide it down to the height that you want them to be at. So we can go here and just move that below this steel edge. And I can now come in and remove a series of them so that I can create an entrance. So as well, a good thing to do would be to have a look at where your paths are. So let's just go here to our Expo Pod layer, and we can go and basically remove a couple of them where we have these paths. So we basically are creating a series of entrances in and out of this central tower. And we can create another one at the back. So once that is done, perhaps you can also add a central lift core into the middle of that. So we can go in and just indicate that using a standard primitive cylinder. So same thing here, we're just going to drag out from the middle, and in our front view we're going to adjust that height to be, let's say, 25 meters, and that's going to take us up all the way to here. We must remember as well that there will be some bulkhead above the lift to keep all the basically the lift room or the motor room, and we can now go and texture that in any way that we like. So you can see what we've done in this lesson. We've basically created these elements. If I just extract them out, and this is what we've basically been working on. So we have a central core for our lift, which can now be detailed if we wanted to take this model into a more realistic model or a more realistic format. We've created stairs for ourselves. We have an outer wood lattice, and we have a steel ring structure. And all of these elements, basically, besides the central two elements, but basically the outer elements, have all been derived from that source object. And that's exactly the same technique that we've been using right from the beginning of the course, where we are always using original source objects. Now, that pretty much brings me to the end of this lesson. I'm going to now look more at a few other detailing elements within this building. Perhaps we can make some refinements to this canopy, and perhaps we can look at a few levels within this building and start creating a roof and a floor material, just that we can start rendering this up as we move towards completion in a moment. So all of that is coming up as we start to detail this building. It's still going to be very, very interesting to watch, so definitely hang around and let's see what this building is going to start looking like.